Hi, man.
What are you doing?
I'm drinking wine and eating cheese and catching some rays, you know. Oh, man. Don't hit me with them negative waves so early in the morning. It's still up. No, it ain't.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
Oh wow. Apparently I've put on the old intro. Man, I really gotta sort my files out here. Man, I'd really suck if I accidentally during my belated spring cleaning day accidentally deleted the current intro. Oh, that would really suck. Oh no, it's right there. Oh, well, we're already here. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Uncut History here on Readout Productions. We go live most Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this pile of electronics that's called my tough laptop. No, literally, it's called it's a tough model laptop that I run everything off of here in Readout Productions. Run the live streams, run the editing software, the very cheap editing software because I'm a very thrifty person on the tube. In any case, welcome to this week's edition. And yes, I went through all that I have in my brand videos, my little video bites over there to pay tribute to Donald Sutherland, who played Oddball, one of the greatest war films, Kelly's Heroes. Sadly, he passed away today. He was at the age of 88. So rest in peace, Donald Sutherland. He left a legacy, one of the best legacies of any actor in the 20th and thus far in the 21st century. Few will ever top his career, let alone will anybody top his portrayal of Oddball in Kelly's Heroes. Somehow we had a hippies in the Second World War. He made it possible. Anyways, let's see who's joining us tonight. Well, we got Wrangler dropping us a 420. Thank you for tuning in. A.S. Burnett has joined us in, and the ghost of Howard's right arm paying respect to Oddball, to Donald Sutherland. Tonight's stream may very possibly see me get to my most geekiest, as we are going to rank the Corps badges of the Union Army during the American Civil War. Yes, it's totally not because I was running out of ideas for these streams. Back to the good old banquet. All right, so a little bit about the Corps badges. If you've watched any of our live streams or any editions of Retracing History, you'll tend to notice that on the uniforms of many a Civil War soldier in the Union Army, especially in the latter years of the conflict, you may notice an odd, very brightly colored symbol, and that is a badge signifying what corps they're attached to. Now, to us today, that's nothing we're not familiar with. If you look over my, not this shoulder over here, you'll see I got this nice pillow over here, throw pillow. The only reason I bought it is because I got the division patch for the 28th Infantry Division, aka the Bloody Bucket, who we've talked about their legacy in the Great War and the Second World War in 2 videos of Retracing History a few weeks back. So nowadays, we're so accustomed to divisions having their unique symbols. Well, that wasn't always the case. And prior to the American Civil War, the United States Army, while they could identify you on the macro level to say, yeah, he's infantry, no, he's artillery, no, he's cavalry, in terms of actual breaking it down amongst the infantry ranks, that really wasn't in existence, the micro level of identification. That all changed with the American Civil War. At the start of the conflict, at least for referring to the federal forces of the United States Army. When the Union armies are first augmented to go and try to suppress the secession of southern states from the Union, what's going to happen is they're still set up in the method that was inspired by Napoleonic fighting back over in Europe, where you had this grand army with a left wing, a right wing, and a center wing. And really, that was just a way to break down the army into nice, free, even thirds, which could operate in a nice battle line on a battlefield. You got your literal left wing, your literal right wing, and your literal center wing. So when the Union Army first went out in the earlier battles of the war, that's how they were organized, left, right, and center wings. That did not work out too well in the American Civil War. We talk about them using Napoleonic tactics very quickly with the rifled muskets that are being used by some of the units. And by the end of the war, most units are using rifled muskets. It was quickly apparent that they were going to have to reform their strategies. And in addition to having to reform their battle strategies, they also had to reform the idea of how we're going to supply, how we're going to deploy our units in battle. And this is where the corps idea really took off. This idea that we're going to have independent corps, that in the Union Army, a corps really would have infantry, usually be augmented with a certain amount of artillery, could be screened with a certain amount of cavalry. Really, they can go off and be their own micro army, an army within an army. They could potentially, if they got cut off, potentially there was a situation where he had to go and immediately hold a vital spot until reinforcements could arrive. They could do it. They could do it all on their own without much immediate support. And famously, you'll see that happen at the Battle of Gettysburg. It's the Union 1st and 11th Corps that show up and assist the small cavalry contingent that is deployed north and west of the town, delaying the Confederates getting into the town and capturing the high ground south of the borough by several hours. So that's a perfect example of how the corps system, the Union Army, had its advantages. But until 1863, there really was no way to identify these corps aside from numerical designation, and most often they were just called, that's McDowell's Corps, that's Sickles' Corps. They would be named after their current commander. And well, the first few years of the American Civil War, especially for the Army of the Potomac in the Eastern Theater, did not go well for them. They faced defeat after defeat at the hands of the Army of North Virginia, initially commanded by Joe Johnson, later commanded by Robert E. Lee. You have that's what I call it the miracle year for Robert E. Lee, where you just have victory after victory for the Army of North Virginia, beginning with overturning the Peninsula Campaign in the summer of 1862. Then Lee is going to destroy a second Union Army at the Battle of Second Manassas. The Army of Potomac will try to go on the offensive again to try to chase down Lee as he invades the North. That leads to a stalemate at Antietam. Then Lee's able to bleed out the Army of the Potomac in December of 1862 at Fredericksburg. The two armies go into winter entrenchments throughout the winter along the Rappahannock and Rapidan rivers. Then in the spring of 1863, there was an effort by Joseph Hooker when he took charge of the Army of the Potomac to outflank Lee. Almost work. Then Hooker lost his nerve, and I got a whole live stream about a year ago dedicated to that, the Battle of Chancellorsville, which is considered Lee's greatest battlefield victory. And then Lee will go on the offensive once more into the northern states, culminating with his defeat at the Battle of Gettysburg. Hooker, when he was put in charge of the Army of the Potomac, everybody knows what happens at the end. It does not go well in terms of the battlefield. He loses spectacularly at Chancellorsville and is forced to withdraw and give up his offensive. And then he is going to be replaced by George Gordon Meade as general of the Army of the Potomac. But for as much flack people get Joseph Hooker, there are some good things he did for the Army of the Potomac, some long-lasting changes he made in early 1863 that all Union forces would benefit from for the end of the conflict. So not just in the immediate change, but for the rest of the war. And in some cases, it would have long-lasting impacts on how the United States of America's armed forces are operated. And one of Hooker's most important impacts as commander, the Corps badge system. Since a lot of these soldiers in the Army of the Potomac in early 1863 were quite demoralized, they're pretty jaded, dejected with the conflict, how things are going. They feel like they're just being thrown in as cannon fodder, that they have no purpose of winning. They're not really interested in this righteous cause that the Lincoln administration is promoting. Well, Hooker sees that as a problem, and if this army wants to win, they got to fight for something. If they're not going to fight for the cause of keeping the Union preserved, at the very least, would you preserve your corps, your infantry corps together? Would you fight for your own troops? Well, the whole local fire department apparently is deploying. I just hear sirens out the window. I don't know if I came over the live stream. He decides to give them a symbol to rally around, similar to the battle flags they are carrying, the national colors that they carry out to the battlefield. And thus, the Corps badge system is adopted in the Army of the Potomac in March of 1863. Technically, there were already Corps units doing this. A division in the 3rd Corps had been adopting red patches as early as the Peninsula Campaign for their officers to denote that they're separate officers from the rest of the Army. And eventually, most of the 3rd Corps were starting to adopt that red patch iconography throughout the rest of 1862. And Dan Butterfield, a close friend of Joseph Hooker, and the newly appointed 3rd Corps commander, Dan the Man Sickles. Dan Sickles is omnipresent in American Civil War history. Have you folks not caught on to this yet? In any case, Hooker is going to hear about this idea of a Corps badge system for Butterfield, what the 3rd Corps already doing, and Hooker's basically sends Butterfield essentially to create designs for the Corps units in the Army of the Potomac, and it becomes known as the Butterfield system. And if you've ever gone to Gettysburg National Military Park, or perhaps Antietam National Battlefield, or a myriad of Civil War related battlefields, especially in the Eastern Theater, and if you notice something like a crescent moon or a star or a shamrock that's on a monument, the reason is that is the Corps badge that regiment was associated with. That's the symbol of the Corps that they were attached to during the American Civil War. Now, initially, it was just for the Army of the Potomac, this Corps badge system, given identifying symbols for each Corps in the Army of the Potomac, but it caught on with the rest of the Union forces in the Western Theater as well. And eventually, almost every one of the 25 Union infantry corps that would be created before the war's end would have some sort of badge insignia. And that is what we're here to rank tonight. The badge insignia is made for most of the 25 Union corps during the American Civil War. And goes Fire's right arms remind us, he had some good days too. He did too. He did have some good days. May 1st, 1863 was not a good day, nor was May 2nd, and especially not May 3rd. But, late March when he created this Corps badge, that was a good day for him. Good day for him. All right, so let's head over to the tier maker. Dan will be the one to party with all the generals. Yeah, just don't sleep with his wife. Well, don't sleep with his wife, but the problem is his wife is going to try to sleep with you because Dan is a, faithless husband, and Dan is, having affairs with all the women of the higher society of Washington, D.C., New York City, and wherever he's currently posted, included one time with the Queen of Spain. Once he almost introduced a prostitute to Queen of England. That would have been very interesting if that had gone through. Yeah, their relationship, Sickles and his first wife, is a very, very, very toxic love, as Tim Curry would put it. Lieutenant Dan, ice cream, Lieutenant Dan. All right, in any case, here we are. We're going to tier maker. This is where I've made our lovely tier maker. I gotta push. I don't know what it is with tiermaker.com. I gotta push the up and down arrow keys on the keyboard. I can't use my mouse. It's really infuriating, but I can use my mouse to drag the symbols. All right, so there are 25 Union infantry corps that are ultimately created for the Union Army during the American Civil War. Most of them ended up with a Corps badge. Not all of them. We'll talk about those ones when we get there. And we're just going to kind of go down from 1 to 25, and we're going to start with the very first Union Army Corps, the first Corps, of course, which operated from 1862 through 1864. They were briefly called the 3rd Corps. Don't get confused. As you'll learn through tonight's talk, the numerical designations fluctuated a lot. But the Union 1st Corps, most famously in charge of commanded by Joshua Reynolds at the Battle of Gettysburg. Reynolds being killed in action while trying to deploy the Union First Corps on July 1st, 1863. This is their badge. It's a simple circle. It's a simple circle. See, yeah, it's a circle. There's not much really to say about it. It is a circle. At least it's easy to identify. It's easy to make as well. And that's something the key to understand. When Butterfield made the original Army of the Potomac badges, there's no real rhyme or reason to what inspired these designs. There is one we'll talk about, but most of them, they were created simply through easy to create symbols that could be cut out of cloth and easily sewn to the uniform. Now, later on in the war, and especially as the Western armies, they added some more input on their design for their Corps badges. You'd start seeing Corps badges actually being made not out of cloth, but you actually see metal pins being created, and they're highly sought after by collectors, including myself. I'd love to get my hands on a few of these Corps badges. So we're starting out with the first Corps of the Union Army. It's a simple circle, middle of the road, C. I think that's a good place for it. Oh, something else I want to mention. So in addition to having a badge to represent each corps, you also would have the badge color coded depending on what division in that corps you served in. So typically a red badge meant you were serving in the 1st division of that corps, a white badge meant you were serving in the 2nd division of that corps, and a blue badge meant you were serving in the 3rd division of that corps. So in addition to rallying around a symbol for the corps, you can rally around a variant for your own division. So when we bring this symbol, this is for the 3rd division of the 2nd Corps of the Union Army. And yes, we've talked about the 2nd Corps. I've talked highly about them during our Overland Campaign videos. They have what was known as a trefoil. Sometimes it's called a shamrock, or just simply, a three-headed clover. The 2nd Corps, in my opinion, is the best corps in the Army of the Potomac to ever exist. This was the hardest fighting corps. You could always call upon them especially between 1862 and 64 if you needed assistance. The 2nd Corps is one of the 5 original corps created for the Army of the Potomac. They will serve for the end of 1864. Then they're kind of reorganized as a Veterans Corps. Sometimes they're called the 1st Veterans Corps. Their most famous corps commander is Winfield Scott Hancock, but they were initially commanded by Edwin Sumner, later by Darius Couch, before Hancock took charge prior to the Gettysburg campaign, and eventually they end up in the care of Andrew Humphreys before the war was over. Was it Andrew Humphreys? Or was it Warren Humphreys? It was one of the Humphreys. It could get confusing. In any case, I adore the 2nd Corps and their legacy. I adore the symbol. I am biased because the ancestor I know the most about from the American Civil War, he served in the 2nd Corps. He was with the 1st Division, the 2nd Corps. So out of bias, I'm putting it A tier. Yeah, A tier. You're number 1 and free and 17. You're all the numbers combined. You got new legs, Lieutenant Dan. Well, Sickles never got a new leg. He was just one-legged Sickles after July 2nd, 1863. He wasn't as fortunate as Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan. All right, moving on. The 3rd Corps. Speaking of which, the 3rd Corps, made infamous by Dan Sickles and all of his wonderful exploits in the peach orchard. And the 3rd Corps is a very, very simple. It's a diamond. It's a diamond. C. I'm almost tempted to put D, but nah, it's Dan Sickles symbol. We'll put up a little more. This 3rd Corps was one of the original Army of the Potomac Corps. It was created in the spring of 1862. And at the end of 1863, it was essentially no more, thanks in part to Dan Sickles' actions at Gettysburg. And that's something they have in common with the 1st Corps. The 1st and 3rd Corps were so badly mauled from the battles of Gettysburg that they were essentially dissolved, and the units of those corps were lumped into other corps throughout the Union forces. The 3rd Corps, they were kind of demoted to a division under General Birney, and Birney's division became attached to the 2nd Corps, just up in the awesomeness of the 2nd Corps. Like I told you, if you remember that image of the divisional leadership of the 2nd Corps that was taken during the Overland Campaign, you got Hancock sitting in like a folding chair, and you got Barlow, you got Bernie, you got Gibbon. Like, that's the cream of the crop when it comes to divisional command of the Army of the Potomac. And the Second Corps got mauled during the Overland Campaign. Man, that last month still haunts me. That took a lot out of me. So yeah, Third Corps, they're only around for about 2 years. They have a very simple symbol. They share a lot with the First Corps in that they got obliterated at Gettysburg. Moving on, we're going to go to the Fourth Corps. It's a triangle. Oh yeah, it's a triangle. Dan Butterfield was being real creative. He used all his creativity into the trifle for the Second Corps. Putting in detail. I'm sorry. I think I have sentimentality because, it's the First Corps, the Black Hats, going into Gettysburg. The Third Corps because of Dan Sickles' ties. There's not much. Interestingly enough, there's actually 2 Union Fourth Corps in existence. The first one operated from 1862 for the end of 1863. Really didn't do all that much. They did what really happened was parts. These were I kind of call them one of the parts corps for the Union Army, where the corps formed, but all the other Union corps that were on the front lines would borrow from them, and they would plug in gaps from losses in earlier battles. Now, the Second Fourth Corps, we'll talk about them a little bit later on. They're created out of 2 other corps, which makes the numerical designation all the more confusing. But more on that later. But in terms of just pure symbol, yeah, it's a triangle. Nah. All right, let's move to the Fifth Corps. Something far better. We got that Iron Cross going here. The Falties Cross going on here. The Fifth Corps. It's created as one of the original 5 Union Army Corps for the Army of the Potomac. So 1862 going into the Peninsula Campaign. It's going to gain quite the fame during the Battle of Gettysburg, when on July 2nd, units of the Fifth Corps are sent to guard, kind of pulled by Governor K. Warren, who was simply then an engineer. Shouldn't say simple. Warren was a very complicated man, as we've learned on this channel. But in that case, he was engineer, not a corps commander yet. He's going to go to the first unit he finds, which is elements of the Fifth Corps. He overrides General Sykes's authority and basically orders these soldiers, get up on top of Little Round Top, or else we're all going to be doomed. So Warren takes charge of elements of the Fifth Corps, overrides General Sykes, who was actually in charge of the Corps, and starts ordering them to Little Round Top and the surrounding area. That's where you get the famed action of the 20th Maine, trying to defend the Union left flank against the 15th Alabama. And for this, Warren would actually be given Corps command of the Fifth Corps in 1864, which was kind of like that dream match you always wanted. Governor K. Warren becoming Corps commander of the Fifth Corps is like Batman versus Superman in 2016. You think you want it, and then you get it, and you realize it's absolute trash. But I love the Fifth Corps symbol. The Iron Cross just always is one of the most iconic symbols of the American Civil War. Always sticks out on monuments. So I'm putting it up there with the trifle of the Second Corps. So those are the original 5 corps that made up the Army of the Potomac in spring of 1862. Oh, number 15. Oh, we'll come up with that soon. Do not fret, Ghost of Howard's right arm. And we're just going down, like I said, we're going down numerical order. So next, the Sixth Corps. And the Sixth Corps, really a parts corps for the first half of their service, beginning in 1862. They would be pulled apart and sent elsewhere to plug gaps. But in 1864, they truly got their chance to shine. Again, if you've watched our Overland Campaign videos, you know that these were kind of the Sixth Corps troops were a little bit the spec ops forces for the Army of the Potomac. If there was an awkward situation and they want to make an experiment, they tended to send the Sixth Corps troops in to deal with it. So they definitely have quite the reputation. So they have the first half of the war is pretty quiet for them, but the last 2 years are especially brutal for them. And for that reason, I'm going to put it as a B. It's just simply a Greek cross. However, once you know the legacy, it's a little bit of a humble symbol. It doesn't make you automatically catch your eye, but it's kind of like the Sixth Corps. It's like poetry. It rhymes. They didn't do much to start, but they eventually got to prove themselves. They're an old reliable. All right, next we're going up to the Seventh Corps. Man, these guys got quite the symbol. So this is the Seventh Corps symbol. Notice it's a star with a crescent over its top. The 7th Corps, at least what I got written down here, they predominantly would have been guarding the Shenandoah Valley in 1862 for 1864. And their most famous Corps commander would have actually, oh, hold on, I'm reading ahead, sorry. Southeastern Virginia. Then later they're attached to the Department of Arkansas. Disregard what I just said. They were organized in 1862. They were deployed in Southeast Virginia. And then at the end of 1863, they were reformed into a new 7th Corps. And they were kind of deployed in the Department of Arkansas, of all places. So a very unique symbol for a very interesting locale to be deployed during the American Civil War. I really don't like the symbol. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe if it was turned another direction, there's something about it. I don't like how it's all turned crooked. So that's the 7th Corps symbol. I'm putting in D tier. It's not really. They could have just tweaked it a little bit. Welcome to the party. Welcome to. Did I say fault? Yeah, I said faulties. Maltese. I'm drinking my banquet. I appreciate you, chat, for sticking through all the times I get tongue-tied. It's a miracle that anything gets produced on this channel, quite honestly. I could cut the tongue out, but then I wouldn't be able to speak. It would just be annoying garbling. Anyways. Oh, hail the fellowship. You are late. Art thou late? Well, here you are. You're in time for us to rank the 8th Corps, which got a very interesting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, they didn't do the 8 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, they could have done an 8-pointed star, but they didn't. Oh, that's disappointing. You could have done an 8-pointed star. No, I'm gonna be angry. Anyways, this is the 8th Corps symbol. You're gonna see a lot of stars. I mean, it's the Union. They like their stars and their crosses. So the 8th Corps were actually the ones I was talking about earlier. They were deployed in the Shenandoah Valley. And their most famous commander of this corps would have been Lew Wallace. And that name may sound familiar because Lew Wallace will go on to become the author of Ben-Hur. And if in one way or another, we're going to talk about the Battle of Monocacy here in early July. I don't know if it'll be in the form of retracing history or if it'll just be a live stream. It'll depend on time availability because that's an overnight trip in itself. I don't have a lot of time left to make that happen. But the elements of the 8th Corps are involved in that battle. So they're involved in guarding the Shenandoah Valley. They get yeeted out of the Shenandoah Valley during the Gettysburg campaign. They actually have a lot of involvement with the fighting that happens around Winchester prior to the Battle of Gettysburg. Everyone forgets the Gettysburg campaign is massive. There's this whole beginning action, fights around Winchester. Then there's the actual fighting in Gettysburg. And then there's the whole third act of the retreat back across the Potomac River. It's a dramatic story, not just the 3 days in Pennsylvania. And the 8th Corps, again, would see action trying to defend Washington, E.T. Jesus Christ, brain, what are you on? Oh, that's right, Corps Banquet. From the Shriver Saloon, according to my cup. Those that know what the Shriver Saloon is. Anyways, 8th Corps. So yeah, they get involved in a lot of fighting, a lot of obscure fighting, but important fighting nevertheless in the American Civil War. I'm going to put in B tier. It's just an interesting star design. All right, let's get into probably the most excessively designed Corps badge, and that is for the 9th Corps. The 9th Corps, I know it's really hard to see since it's a tiny screen. It is a cannon crossing an anchor on a shield badge. The 9th Corps, of course, was commanded by General Ambrose E. Burnside, a man full of disappointment. Burnside's troops, to be fair to them, they are in just about every major theater you can think about during the American Civil War. The 9th Corps ran all across the United States during the conflict. Of course, they're most famously attached to the Army of Potomac, but prior to that, they were actually attached to the Department of Virginia, and they were doing a lot of coastal operations in the spring of 1862 along North and South Carolina, which is why the badge design is the way it is. And this is really the first badge that actually has there's some symbolism behind it in relation to the Corps' history. This is to denote all of their coastal operations, hence the anchor. We all know Burnside for having a case of the slows. But upon further examination, there may be a reason to that. The 9th Corps is going to see action on the Carolina coast They're going to see action in the Eastern Theater at the Army of the Potomac between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. They're then going to be sent out to assist Western forces in trying to defend Knoxville, Tennessee from the Confederates in 1863. They're then going to come back into the Eastern Theater for the Overland Campaign. And before this whole mess is over and done, they end up with the Department of the Ohio. They're all over the place. So that may be why they always are slow in action. They're just so fatigued. It's a bit too busy for my taste, but it's such a well-designed badge, catches your attention because there's so much detail compared to other Army of the Potomac badges. So you're like, ooh, what's that? What's the Ninth Corps story? So there you are. Burnside is in B tier. Probably the only time I'll ever put him in B tier. All right, up to the 10th Corps. The 10th Corps have... I actually have to check. Okay, 10th Corps, they have a very interesting design. It is the outline of a star fort, which was the go-to pattern to create a fortification. It had been created by the French and back, I want to say it was during the 15th or 16th century. This idea was came up with by the French, and it would be employed by all major armed forces well through the 20th century. The idea of the star forts, the protruding bastions that create elements of crossfire, make it very difficult for an enemy force to penetrate the walls. And I believe, I cannot find any written proof on this, I believe there's a reason why it's a star fort for the badge of the 10th Corps. The 10th Corps, which were founded in 1862 and operate through 1864, I keep looking down. It's 1865. Wow. I have this lovely sheet to identify because there's so many symbols to identify them. The 10th Corps, they predominantly were involved with coastal operations in North and South Carolina as well as Florida, but they would later be sent to the Eastern Theater to try to distract Confederate forces between Richmond and Petersburg during a Bermuda 100 campaign, which is occurring at the same time as the Overland Campaign. The 10th Corps were commanded by Quincy Gilmore, and one of his first actions in the American Civil War, Quincy Gilmore's small Union force shelled the Confederate fortress of Fort Pulaski to oblivion. What they did was they had rifled cannons, and they had conical sphere projectiles, and they're firing them at a brick fortress. They go through like lasers. And many people say the fighting at Fort Pulaski is basically the beginning of the end of traditional fort warfare. There was no way you can fortify with brick against artillery pieces going forward. They were just easy targets at that point. So I think that's why the 10th Corps adopted a badge reflecting Gilmore's legacy. And also, they were involved a lot with what I call fort busting, especially along the coastline of North and South Carolina. In fact, you do know about elements of the 10th Corps. You don't realize it, but they actually got probably one of the better cinematic depictions. They're kind of starlets because one of the members of the 10th Corps was the 54th Massachusetts, which of course are the main story piece for the movie Glory, about one of the first all African American regiments raised in the Union Army during the American Civil War. So the 10th Corps were involved in that assault on Fort Wagner that the 54th Massachusetts led. And I think for that reason, that's why they chose the Star Fort design. They were always involved with some type of fortification busting. It's a very unique design. It's a little bit busy for my taste. No, it's a very unique design. It stands out compared to the Circle. I won't be too cruel to the star design. Just a little awkward for a badge design, but there's such history behind it, which makes it so awesome. All right, up to the 11th Corps now. The 11th Corps got a crescent, and I like this crescent. It's not as complicated as the 7th Corps. The 11th Corps, they get a bad rap all the time by the general telling of the battles of Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. They're known dubiously as the Flying Dutchman. A good portion of the 11th Corps are noted as being German immigrants, and they were always put in the worst locations on the battlefield. They're always at the worst time, the worst location. They were on the extreme right flank of the Union line at Chancellorsville. Their right flank had not been anchored down, which led to Jackson's famous flank attack, which rolled up the Union right flank and ultimately would lead to the Confederates driving Hooker's Army of the Potomac out of the Chancellorsville Crossroads and back across the Rappahannock and Rapidan rivers. They would once again find themselves on the extreme right flank of the Union line at the Battle of Gettysburg. They were extended too thin. The Jackson's old corps was able to smash right through their center, and they were forced to fall back. But I always argue against people who doubt the 11th Corps because, man, 11th Corps were given a bad rap, and they fought tooth and nail for the streets of Gettysburg. And like, there's moments where there's units of the 11th Corps being thrown out just to buy minutes. And they're suffering like 50, 60, 70% casualty rates just to try to buy the rest of the Army of Potomac just a few extra minutes to redeploy on the high ground south in town so they won't be overwhelmed by the Confederates. And on the night of July 2nd, I feel the 11th Corps completely redeemed themselves when the Confederates get to the very crest of Cemetery Hill. They're about to overrun some of the artillery pieces, and then elements of the 11th Corps run back in with the bayonet, drive the Confederates off the hill, and secure the hook of the fish hook. You know, the very point where the hook comes around Cemetery Hill, that famous Union formation. However, similarly to the 1st and 3rd Corps, after the Battle of Gettysburg, they've been so badly mauled, and they're going to be sent west, what's left of them, to the Tennessee region. And you might recall we talked about them also during our focus on the battles for Chattanooga. They would be augmented with another corps we're going to talk about shortly, and they once again to perform pretty good in the Western Theater. All right, so where do we put? I want to make sure. Anything else about the 11th Corps? Nope, they're dissolved in 1864, and their units go elsewhere. So we're going to put them in B tier. I would put in A tier, but there's not a lot of moon to it. Just a little sliver of a moon. Not a lot of badge there. Next up, we're going to have the 12th Corps, which is a star. You know, eventually we're gonna have just a plain old star. It's the Union Army. The 12th Corps are kind of the twin of the 11th Corps, especially what happens to them after Gettysburg. The 12th Corps, they're attached to the Army of Potomac. They see heavy fighting on top of Culp's Hill at the Battle of Gettysburg, and they're pretty badly mauled, and their surviving divisions are sent out with the 11th Corps, and they're under the overall command of Joseph Hooker. And if you remember when we talked about the battle above the clouds, the battle happens on Lookout Mountain, and then later the fighting that's going to happen on the Confederate left flank along Missionary Ridge, that's elements of the 11th and 12th Corps fighting in the Western Theater. And they later be unified to create a whole new corps that we're going to talk about later on. So, it's just a star. Sorry, guys. It's just a star. Sorry, 12th Corps. It's just a star. And it's going to get worse later on. You see that there's an identical symbol down the line. I wonder why. Anyways. All right. All right, so those are all the Army of the Potomac Corps badges, but we have some other Corps badges to get to, the Western Theater Corps badges. And these guys really took them. They had more chance because they start hearing about this Corps badge system. I think the reason they really start hearing about it is because when the 11th and 12th Corps come over under Hooker's command to reinforce the Union troops in Chattanooga, that's really when all these Western troops are exposed to this Corps badge idea. And I think they all go, because it's all the Western Theater troops, you know, man, they're just cut from a different cloth. You know, they're like, oh, you people, you got all of your nice symbols given to you by Mr. Hooker. Oh yeah, well, we're out here we're basically starving, waiting for crackers to get down here to Chattanooga. Where's the press? No press here. Oh wait, is it because, you know, anytime the press shows up, they impede our progress? Did I ever tell you a story about how Sherman threatened to court-martial a journalist during the fighting around Vicksburg? That's a story for another day. So we're into the Western Theater. First, you're going to notice something. The 13th Corps. As far as I'm aware, they never given a Corps badge. The reason is the 13th Corps started life as essentially the building block of the Army of Tennessee. This was Ulysses S. Grant's first major army command, the 13th Corps. It's the middle portion of what will become the Army of Tennessee, the Tennessee, and not to be confused with the Army of Tennessee. That's a Confederate army. I'm talking about the Army of the Tennessee. This will be the force that he'll command, places like Shiloh and at Shiloh, and later you'll see employed parts of it at Vicksburg. And eventually they morph with the Army of the Cumberland to become the ultimate Confederate wrecking machine. Yeah, they become Shermanzilla. Yeah, that's a term I just used. Shermanzilla. So 13th Corps really don't have a symbol because it really wasn't. They did exist numerically, but very quickly just became the whole of the Army of Tennessee. So let's move up to the 14th Corps. The 14th Corps, and man, this digital variant doesn't do it justice. This is an acorn. I've seen some of the privately made metal pins that soldiers would have done for the 14th Corps. Beautiful metal acorn design. I don't know what this turd is, this red turd. Man, somebody suffering from the bloody flux that's on this image. So they had an acorn. The legend goes that the reason the 14th Corps adopt an acorn to show the hard times they've been through, that they did not crack. They're as hard as an acorn, which matches pretty similarly to their Corps commander, George H. Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga. This is the Corps that is going to save the rest of the Army of the Cumberland at the Battle of Chickamauga. They're going to form up along Horseshoe Ridge. And as Rosecrans runs off the battlefield and the Confederates have pierced through the center of the Union line, all the Union troops are trying to try to run up the Lafayette Road back to Chattanooga. Some of those troops are going to rally around the 14th Corps, and Thomas makes this gallant stand on top of this ridgeline for several hours and buys time for the Army of the Cumberland to evacuate from the Chickamauga battlefield and start to entrench around Chattanooga. So the acorn design is very fitting. I really like the acorn design. This is just a very bad rendering of it. So I'm going to put it in B. I'm not going to put in A because it's not the true symbol that I've seen in images, the historic symbol. So it's a very bad digital rendition. So it's a B tier, but in my heart, it's an A tier because the acorn, fantastic symbol for George A. Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga. And if you've never had the chance, I highly encourage you, please go and watch our video from a few years back called General Hood's Tennessee Christmas of '64. And you can learn about the wonders of when the Confederate Army of Tennessee decided to try to recapture Tennessee while the rest of the Confederacy was crumbling around them. It is quite the journey. All right, moving on to the 15th Corps. Hey, there you are, Ghost of Howard's right arm. Here is your Corps badge. The 15th Corps, and boy, does it got a story. I don't know if you can tell, but the 15th Corps, it's a diamond, very similar, almost looks identical to the 3rd Corps, but you'll notice there's something gray in there. That is a cartridge box, one of those boxes that'd be on the hip of a soldier where their rounds are to load their muskets, their rifled muskets. All right, so why is there a cartridge box on a Corps badge symbol? After all, didn't everybody have a cartridge box? Yes, they did. It's a little bit of spite thrown back at the Army of the Potomac Corps. So, remember, as I mentioned, that after the Battle of Gettysburg, the ruins of the 11th and 12th Corps are sent west to reinforce the Army of the Cumberland and Army of the Tennessee, who are currently pinned down in Chattanooga by the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Well, as these Eastern troops are moving into Chattanooga and basically like, oh, we're here to rescue you. And, the Western troops are like, oh, yeah, the Army of the Potomac's going to rescue us. You just won your first battle. And what did it cost you? 4 of your Corps? Oh, you guys are shit. So, apparently these 11 and 12 Corps guys are heckling 15 Corps guys. And they ask, well, where are your Corps badges? And one of the gentlemen from the 15 Corps supposedly starts smacking his cartridge box and is like, this is our Corps badge. 40 rounds is all we need. And this story spread like wildfire throughout the 15th Corps, and they decided, all right, you want a Corps badge, Eastern troops? There, we claim the universal cartridge box that everybody's using. That's our property. That's our insignia. That's the pride of the 15 Corps because it's on every soldier here. This may have the best story of a Corps badge being created. And for that very reason, it is going into A tier. Just my God. A little bit more about the 15th Corps. So they were attached to the Army of Tennessee. This was William Tecumseh Sherman's Corps that he commanded throughout 1863 at Vicksburg and later at Chattanooga. So, yeah, you don't want to mess with the troops of the 15th Corps because they may burn your house down. Just saying, guys, don't want to mess with these troops. And they also would take part in the marching on Atlanta. Later on, they would be under the command of Blackjack John Logan as well. So A tier, 15th Corps got a killer story attached to their badge. I want to find an original, a badge or a pin, and so I could put it into my collection. All right, we're on to the 16th Corps. Who's getting tired yet? Probably just me. Oh man, did you see that? Jeez. I fell right off the bottom, and it was sealed. It was sealed to the glass. And then the holder just fell right off. It was so perfect. And it fell right off. A complete embarrassment. All right, to the 16th Union Corps. And well, they got simply another cross. We got another cross here, folks. And we got a lot of crosses, if you've not noticed on tonight's stream. And I'm trying to figure out which cross in particular, because there's just a chain of crosses coming up here. All right, this is the 16th Corps. They got the round cross. They got the round Maltese cross right here. So it's the rounder sibling of the 5th Corps. A little bit about the 16th Corps. They were formed in 1862, and this was a parts corps, as I like to call them. This was scattered to support other corps. They operated throughout 1865, but they would see some heavy fighting at the very end of the conflict and operations around Mobile, Alabama. So they do see fighting. It's not really, the heavy stuff really isn't until the end of the war as a unified front. It's a very interesting design, but we already have a Maltese cross. I'm going to put it in B tier. You're just copying from the 5th Corps. All right, to the 17th Corps. Well, here's a different one. It's an arrow. I don't quite know the story behind this one. I couldn't figure it out. This was created from elements of the 13th Corps. What ended up happening, remember, the 13th Corps was the Corps Ulysses S. Grant commanded. It was huge. It was the biggest corps I ever saw in my life. And then they just basically created the Army of the Tennessee out of the 13th Corps. And the 13th Corps spawned off 2 corps. One of them was the 15th Corps, who we just talked about, hosted by Grant's good friend, Sherman. And then there was also the 17th Corps. And these guys were under the command of James McPherson, who would be one of the highest ranking Union generals killed in battle. He's killed at the Battle of Atlanta. So, Army of Tennessee got a very unique design. I put in B tier. I don't have much. I got to be perfectly honest. I don't know too much about the 17th Corps, other than McPherson's attached to them. Got to do more research on them. But they got a really unique design. Yep. Huge. It's the hugest corps we ever saw in the Union Army. It's huge. It's great. All right, up to the 18th Corps. And you may recall these guys. We did talk about them at the end of our Overland Campaign series. As the 18th Corps, they were initially designed to do coastal operations. Then they got roped into the Army of the James when they were trying to demonstrate in front of Petersburg and Richmond on the Bermuda 100. Notch there in the James River. They really didn't do a whole lot there. So Grant called the 18th Corps out of the Bermuda 100 to reinforce him at Cold Harbor. And we all know how great it was to be at Cold Harbor for a Union soldier. So 18th Corps. They got well, I do not have the 18th Corps badge. This is awkward. So I'm just going to, you know what? We're just going to play. Hey, I didn't really get to play what can I play as I goof off and go find the 18th Corps badge?
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Thank you for insulting me, Joe Pesci. I feel like I need it after what I just did. If you're wondering why the cover from Mockingjay showed up, you don't need to know about it. You kind of do. I tell you what, if you want to know why Mockingjay, Joe Pesci was swearing at Mockingjay, you can go over to the Fubar Digital Lounge, which is our pop culture channel, and you can hear about the wonders of Suzanne Collins' understanding of how a dictatorship works. It's pretty messed up. So 18th Union Corps. Here we are. All right, so this is the 18th Union Corps badge. It's another cross. It's a pretty interesting cross. It's like a German cross, I want to describe it as. And the 18th Corps, they did coastal operations. Yeah, coastal operations. Man. Yeah, 18th Corps did coastal operations. Yep, we already read about them. Wow. Why am I telling them story? The banquet's hitting me. I'm probably going to need some coffee in the morning to drown out the banquet. This may not have been a good decision. I need to get that PSA that me and a humble collector created a few months back. I need to get that like in our stream here. It's like, we don't condone drinking, especially not driving, but we're gonna do it anyways for the funsies. So it's a German cross. It's another cross. Can I get this into the tier list? Considering I created the tier list, you'd think, or am I? Oh, choose file. You're seeing in real time me try to edit this error. All right, there we are. Perfect. Okay, the last 5 minutes, I made no mistakes. The 18th Corps badge has always been there. I do really like this cross, but I already put one across. I'm gonna have to stick to my rule. I'm like, hey, look, I already put one across in A tier. Can't keep putting them all in A tier. They have nice variations, I'll say, but man, really cross heavy. I get why, but really cross heavy. All right, we're back on course. I didn't make any errors at all. 19th Corps, let's go. 19th Corps is another cross. Crap. It's another cross. It's the big brother of the 5th Corps. It's moved up in the world. Yeah. So 19th Corps, an interesting detail about there was a noticeable contingent of United States color troops amongst the 19th Corps. And they would have operated from 1862 for 65 in the Department of the Gulf. So they're operating throughout the Gulf of Mexico, through Louisiana, and eventually down into Texas under the command of Nathaniel Banks, most famously. Nope, I had to stick with the B tier. I love all these cross designs, but come on, guys, think of something else. Come on, you can be a little more creative than that. 20th Corps, here we are. 20th Corps. Oh, feel a little bad insulting the 18th and 19th Corps for reusing the same design. So remember when I said that after the Battle of Gettysburg, the 11th and 12th Corps under the overall command of Joseph Hooker came west. Well, eventually they were unified into a brand new Union Corps. And that brand new Union Corps looked something like this. You're just using the 12th Corps. Well, come on, guys. That's mean. That's being mean to the German soldiers. That's being mean to the 11th Corps. 12th Corps, you're being mean to them. There were other units in here as well. It wasn't just the vestiges of the 11th and 12th Corps. There were other units from Western Theater Corps that were refolded into them. The 20th Corps was attached to the Army of the Cumberland. Initially, it was completely unrelated to Hooker's command. It was under Alexander McCook, but McCook he basically got sacked after what happened at Chickamauga. So they's like, hey, we got a free Corps designation. Hooker, you want it? Yeah, after all, you created the Corps, Corps badge system. So Hooker took charge of the 20th Corps, and he'd be in command of it through the first half of the campaign onto Atlanta. Then there was a whole drama over succession of a command. Somebody else was going to get promoted to the command of the overall army, and he got ticked off about it, so he resigned. And then Henry Slocum ended up in charge of the 20th Corps, which is ironic because he's basically commanding the 12th Corps all over again. He just uses a F tier. Come on. Come on. That's just lazy. It's the same symbol. And you're leaving the 11th Corps guys out, too. Anyways. So yeah, F tier, 20th Corps design. Boo. You could have been more creative. I get why you use the star again, but I don't like it. All right, on to the 21st Corps. The 21st Corps, to my knowledge, technically does not have a Corps badge, so I did find this very awkward computer-generated symbol of an eagle with the number 21 in it, so F tier. Anyways, a little bit more about the 21st Corps. 21st Corps was folded into the new 4th Corps, so it only lasted for about a year, and then it's folded into the new 4th Corps of the Army of Cumberland. I told you these numerical designations were going to get really screwy. Ugh, I hate it. So yeah, they didn't just keep the numerical designation. They folded the Corps and took its units and put it into a new 4th Corps. And yeah, I don't know why they did it, and I don't like it. Oh yeah, that's right. So when the 21st Corps, they merge with McCook's men who vacate the 20th Corps designation. They combine their power to become the new 4th Corps and presumably to flaunt another triangle. What the hell? What is it with you? These weird numerical designations. Just, you ever heard of retiring a numerical designation? I guess they didn't want to confuse people by having all right, we lost the 21st, we lost the 4th Corps now, so now everybody else got to drop a number, and it's 3 years in the war. Okay, fair enough. Next up, we're going to have the 22nd Corps. 22nd Corps. I have to look down my notes again. These guys were predominantly known also as the Department of Washington. These are the troops at the start of the war that are defending Washington, D.C., as well as the rail lines west of Washington, D.C., along the Potomac River. So this doesn't mean they did not see combat. Several of them are going to be dealing with Mosby's Confederate raiders around western Maryland and West Virginia, as Mosby's is trying to cut up the Baltimore and Ohio rail line. So they're going to see small skirmishing at the start of the war. But eventually the 22nd Corps, they're going to see some pretty large action when Jubal Early leads a Confederate contingent out of the Shenandoah Valley and to assault Washington, D.C. That's right. In July of 1864, there was actually a battle in front of Washington, D.C., though elements of the 22nd Corps were able to stop them. And later on, I want to say elements of the 22nd Corps did some. Oh, there was also several heavy artillery units attached to the 22nd Corps, like the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery, who eventually would be reassigned. They would eventually be reassigned to the Army of the Potomac as the war progressed. All right, so they got another cross, but this is a very unique cross. I really like this cross design. Screw it, it's my rule book. I'm going to put an A tier. I just think it's a cool cross design. All right, up to the 23rd Corps. We're almost there. 23rd Corps, a.k.a. the Army of the Ohio. They were under the command of John M. Schofield. This is the Union Corps. That's one of the major Union Corps. It's going to face off with Hood's Army of Tennessee at the Battle of Franklin, sometimes called the bloodiest 5 hours in American history, when Hood decided, hey, you people thought Pickett's charge was bad. You want to see me do it on twice the scale and twice the amount of troops? And he did. And it was horrible. So, yeah, Schofield mauled the Army of Tennessee at Franklin, then fell back to merge in with George H. Thomas's command of the Army. Was he the Army of Tennessee? He had a command of, was it Army of, I'm too late to just remember. Is that the Army of Cumberland, Army of Tennessee? It was an attachment. So at least the 14th Corps, right? That was holding Nashville. I want to say it was. Sorry, guys. I'm messing up my history. It's late in the stream. There's so many Corps badges on screen. Here we are with the 23rd Corps, Army of Ohio, John M. Schofield, notable for the Battle of Franklin. It's simply a shield. It's here. Simple shield. To be fair, the 9th Corps had more fun with their shield design. All right. To the 24th Corps. And it's a heart. It's a heart. These last 2 corps we're going to talk about, they only lasted for a few months at the very end of the American Civil War. They are created out of the vestiges of the 18th. Yeah, the 18th Corps, correct? Yeah, the 18th Corps, I want to say. Yeah, these were created out of the vestiges of the 18th Corps after there was controversy over how the 18th Corps performed during the Bermuda 100 and later during the Siege of Petersburg. So they just basically split up the 18th Corps. I want to say, is it the 18th Corps, though? are my numbers? Because I got 4 lines there, and that's making me real suspicious. Anyways, there was a corps in the Union Army. They didn't do so hot during the Siege of Petersburg, so they decided to split them into 2 corps, the 24th and 25th at the end of the war. The 24th Corps, this was predominantly the white soldiers of this older retired corps. They're going to see action in the Siege of Petersburg for the latter months, and coastal operations are under the command of Edward Ord. It's a hard D tier. And last but not least, the 25th Corps. So again, from that older Union Corps that upset the higher brass due to their mismanagement during the Siege of Petersburg, these were predominantly the United States colored troops of that distress corps. So they got their own, like a good portion of this is USCT troops. They have their own corps to themselves. They're going to see action in the Siege of Petersburg. And interestingly enough, they're going to be sent after, the surrender at Appomattox. The 25th Corps is going to be sent out to Texas. They're going to be sent out to Texas and take charge of the Texas border because there were some shenanigans happening in Mexico at this period in time. The second French intervention in Mexico was occurring, and not good times down there. And the American Civil War was just wrapping up, and we absolutely did not want to get roped into another war. So it was the 25th Corps that was sent down there as an army of occupation, mainly to make sure Texas, the Confederacy is put down in Texas, but also to make sure no Frenchies or nobody from Mexico is going to cross over that border and make our lives all the more difficult. So 25th Corps, I really want to research their history. They weren't around too long, but man, they did a lot of interesting stuff. My only grievance, it's the same. It's the 3rd Corps badge. It's the 3rd Corps badge. No. Sorry guys. No, I don't like I don't write repetition on these. And while after my tongue, well, I wasn't tongue twisted. I was tongue train wrecked during this stream. As we wind this down. Bad Acorn, bad. Don't worry, I'm pretty far behind reading this as well. Put the symbol of Umbrella Corps in there and see if anybody notices. Oh wow, never thought about that. That would be a pretty good Corps badge, though. All right, so there you have it. That is my ranking on what is the best and worst Corps badges used by Union Army Corps during the American Civil War. At the very bottom, we got the 20th Corps, because they're just using the 12th Corps. And then you got the 21st Corps, which technically that's not their actual Corps badge, because to my knowledge, they didn't have a Corps badge. So that's what Wikipedia gave me. Then we got the 25th Corps, which, as much as I want to research their legacy, man, you just use the 3rd Corps badge. I mean, I'm glad you carry on the legacy of Dan Sickles, but come on, man. That's just, so I have a nice quote for my angers. Come on.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Yeah, that's my response to on the 20th Corps. It's like, look, behold, our Corps badge. And, the X11 Corps guys are like, they're looking at them like,
I feel I was denied critical, need to know information.
Love that. I love using Burt Gummer clips on this channel too. All right, let's move up to D tier. Up at D tier, we got the 24th Corps, which is just a freaking heart. At least it's different. Then we got that very awkward star crescent, that eldritch horror if you combine the 11th and 12th Corps together. That should have been their symbol. Am I positive it's not their symbol? Let me look it up. 20th Corps badge. Because that would just make more sense if that was their symbol. No, I want the Union Army one. No, it's just a star. It is just a star. The 7th Corps had the much superior. If you're going to steal a badge design, why didn't you just steal the 7th Corps? I don't think the 7th Corps is around by that point. Okay, they've been reunified, but you can steal their homework. Nobody's talking about them. All right, so, and then we got the 4th Corps, which is just a triangle, because I guess they're going to play the triangle and make Christopher Walken happy. To the mid-tier, that is C, we got a simple shield for the my brain froze. To the 23rd Corps, very simple. Simple but effective. There we got the star for the 12th Corps. I don't have a problem with the star. The star is a fine basic symbol, especially in the Union Army. Just don't just repeat it. Then we got the symbol for the 3rd Corps, commanded by Dan the Man Sickles. Then we got the 1st Corps badge, which is just a nice, simple circle. Into the B tier. These are pretty good badges, but there's a lot of crosses, and I'm like, there's only room for one cross in this tier list. So going backwards, we're going to have the 19th Corps. Then we got the 18th Corps. Then we got the 17th Corps. Then we got the 16th Corps. Then we got the 8th Corps and the 14th Corps. Again, if I could have found a royalty-free image of like one of the actual pins that some of the soldiers had for the 18th Corps, that'd been A tier. Then we got the 11th Corps Crescent, 10th Corps Fort. There's a lot of symbolism behind the fort. Then we got another one with a lot of legit symbolism, the 9th Corps badge, showing that they're well-traveled individuals. And we got the really cool star with the 8th Corps, even though they have 6 points on the 8th Corps badge. That bothers me. Then we got the 6th Corps star. 6th Corps. That is a cross readout. That is a cross. I need to drink more Banquet. And then we're into the A tier, the best tier. First, we got I think that's what Wrangler meant earlier about, let's use the Umbrella Corps badge and nobody will notice. Who was the Emergency Corps symbol? So that's what we're talking about right now. That was actually the 22nd Corps. That's the Department of Washington. So that was the Union Army Corps that was predominantly attached to defending these forts around Washington, D.C. And there were always the men getting tied up by Mosby's Rangers. Then you're going to have the 15th Corps badge, which you may not be able to see. It is literally the symbol of a U.S. Army cartridge box with all the rounds for your rifled musket, because the 15th Corps were poking fun at the Corps badge system that the Eastern troops had adopted. And the Eastern troops are like, oh, we're so much better than you. We are dignified men. We got Corps badges. Ha, ha, ha. And the 15th Corps is like, well, you know what our badge is? Cartridge box. Everybody got one here in the Western Theater, in the Eastern Theater, in the whole of the Union Army. This is all the more we need to prove that we are competent troops in battle. And it actually became their actual Corps badge. It just put a cartridge box on it. So it's awesome, and I want to collect one. Then we got the 5th Corps badge with the Maltese Falcon. Iconic. It's simply iconic, especially if you watch the movie Gettysburg. You see it on Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's, Jeff Daniels portraying Chamberlain. It's on his attire. It's on everybody's attire in the 20th Maine. And then we got my personal all-time favorite Corps badge. It's the 2nd Corps, the Trefoil. The reason is a soft spot in my heart. My ancestor, at least one of them, served in the 2nd Corps during the American Civil War. So family reasons is why I identify with that Corps badge. I love it to bits. And also, there's a lot of unique ways it's imposed on monuments at Gettysburg. Probably the most unique, I want to say, is the 106 Pennsylvania. And what they ended up doing was they put 3 drums on the top of this shaft that makes up their monument. And then they had like one of the straps on the drums turning down over the monument, and it makes the trefoil. It's very subtle, but it makes that clover design. So there's many different ways the 2nd Corps badge has been incorporated into artwork to commemorate the 2nd Corps regiments from the American Civil War. And that is our tier rank, guys. What do you think? You think you could do it better than me? Probably could. So what I'm going to do is, hey, look, there's me. It's me. Me, Butters. Man, I'm making a South Park reference. All right, how do I share this darn thing? And now you will see Readout Productions on Twitter. Or I could just, copy that link, like Neptune intended links to be used. Oh, it's not there, though. Drat. All right. All right, I'm gonna drop the link. Hopefully, the link's working. It'll be in the chat right now. If not, I'll make sure to get this set up on Twitter. There's the link in the chat below. If you too want to one up me in ranking the core badges of the Union Army during the American Civil War. So yeah, this was just an idea I had on a whim this morning. I'm like, what am I gonna do this week? And I'm like, oh, core badges. That'll be fun. Because what these core badges do, like I said, this is really the first major effort by armed forces of the United States to use identifying symbols per unit. At this point, it was core badges, but it'll actually get a little bit smaller scale. What you'll see during the Great War and the Second World War, they will start using divisional symbols. And a lot of them divisional symbols are still sticking around today. So we'll probably do another stream here where we'll talk about the World War's division badges for the American Armed Forces that were involved in it, like the Bloody Bucket, which you can see on the pillow over there. Which wow, Lily, you're really good at Vienna whited it over there. Yeah, over there, licking your tail. She's the evil one, by the way. That's the evil cat. Yeah, if you hear me talk about the evil one, it's Lily. It's her. She's evil. She's evil. Fred's just Fred, the other cat. He's all gray. His curiosity killed the cat. And then if you see the gray and white, that's Ash. She's Wendy Weiner. She just balls. She's just a darling, but she just balls. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in tonight for this wild stream here on Readout Productions. Be sure to catch the new edition of Retracing History. That'll be coming out this Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be going back to Fort Necessity in this Retracing History, scene of George Washington's first and only military surrender. But we're not going to really be talking about George Washington, at least not through his perspective. We're going to talk about the battle through the enemy commander's perspective, Louis Coulon de Villiers. We're going to talk about the French commander that forced Washington to make his first and only military surrender. So that'll be a fun change of perspective for Retracing History. And then we should be back here next Thursday for another edition of Uncut History. Subject set to change on that one. Thank you guys for tuning in. Before we depart, I need to actually so see, if you're just tuning in now, I have forgot put in the right intro. We had a throwback. We played the old intro. See, the reason I got messed up is today I was deep cleaning my computer's hard drive. I got like almost 300 gigabytes transferred from the computer to other storage units. That way my computer can breathe a sigh of relief and I can get back to editing without the risk of, blowing up my computer or something. So my files are all scrambled and I grabbed the wrong intro, the old intro. So let's play the new intro to send us off. Not that's brand new. We played this for a few weeks, but this is the more got the battle cry of freedom. So here we are. We're going to play the intro as our outro. Have a good night, everybody.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
Yes, we'll reel around the flag, boys will reel it once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We will reel it from the hillside, all together from the plain, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah! Down with the traitors, up with the stars. We will reel around the flag, boys, and reel it once again, shouting the battle cry